This week's show brought to you by the NBA offseason. Welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. If you noticed on the tease, I thanked the NBA offseason and then said nothing because that's pretty much what's going on and what we'll discuss. But luckily, there's still some Olympics and still some other things to talk about today. And as luck would have it, Patrick Minton, who has been out the last couple of weeks, is back. So Patrick, a.k.a. NBA Geek on Twitter, say hey.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I don't have a camera. I'm a loser.
Wow, man, that escalated quickly. Anyway, and as always, we are produced by our own voice of God, Brian Foster. You can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. In case you chime in too, Brian, say hey.
Yeah, how's it going? And, camera or not, we'll still keep going in this show. We're all winners in my book.
So let's just hop into it. Like I said, we'll talk a little bit of the NBA. We'll talk some Olympics. We'll talk some past articles I wrote, maybe. If we spend 5 minutes on those, it'd be longer than I expect. But let's get going. And also as a teaser to that as well, I'm horrible at predicting how long we're going to talk stuff on the show. So if you're listening to this in the future, take all of those with a grain of salt. Mm-hmm. So last season, we had what we called the NBA wall of boredom. So basically in the offseason, after all the big trades happened, we would look over, I would look at ESPN.com/NBA/transactions and move around a bit. And so in the last, in the last week since we really talked, one of the major trades, although I think we briefly mentioned it, was LeBron James signed a 3-year contract. We're going to talk more about that and the implications. That was kind of a foregone conclusion. The other, I'll put in quotes, major moves are the Miami Heat signed Bino Udrih to a 1-year contract. The Memphis Grizzlies named somebody to a coaching gig that doesn't matter at all. I'm not even going to go into any further depth than that. It wasn't even the head coach, and even then we'd argue it might be, sketchy that mattered at all. The Bucks, my Milwaukee Bucks, I struggle to call them that, especially after all of the recent stuff pointing out it's like one of the most racist cities in the United States. So even living in the same state, I think maybe I'll just call Chicago Bulls. They're close in terms of driving distance, so they seem like a slightly better team. They signed Jason Terry, which is odd to me. And then the Lakers signed their second pick, Brandon Ingram, who, I think anything can happen. We don't say anything about draft picks. Who knows? We did not think highly of his college numbers, and they also signed I'm going to butcher his last name, Jianlin, I think, who at one point was in the Chinese NBA Finals. I heard it marketed at one point when the Bucks were playing the Rockets back when him and Yao were both in the NBA. So, as you can see, not a lot of major moves. Patrick, want to comment on any of them? Bino, major. Jason Terry, G. Janlin, and I don't really count Brandon Ingram because obviously as a top 3 draft pick, there was never any question that he was going to sign or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think with both the Udrih signing and the Terry signing, we talk about this all the time. People say, well, it's cheap and it doesn't matter. And our response is usually, well, it's not the money, it's the roster spot. That roster spot, I think we can all agree that neither player is really going to move the needle at all in terms of, like, they're not going to win more games because of that player, and they're probably not going to lose games because of that player. It's not like that player is bad enough to cost them victories. But what they are going to lose is a roster spot that they could have spent on, like, a second-round draft pick or an undrafted player or something like that. Some speculative pick that might turn out to be a really good contract, or might not. But, I mean, you can't even roll that die if you soak up that roster spot with a player that pretty much by definition doesn't do anything, doesn't really move the needle either way. And so that's what I have to say about those two. But with the Yi signing, that seems to be very obviously a move to just market the Lakers in China. It's obvious that $8 million is a lot of money for a player who couldn't make an NBA roster 2 or 3 years ago, and has probably not really improved since then.
And
it's blatantly a marketing move, right?
He was terrible. I mean, I don't know if it's injury or whatever. His first couple of seasons with Milwaukee, and I have to believe at the time New Jersey, he just was not good. And then he ended up on Washington for a season where he saw a decrease in minutes and was also terrible. Then his last stint, which was in 2012. I mean, think about that. let's see, back in 2012, the Lakers were still relevant. So in 2012, he only played 200 minutes on Dallas and was god awful. So when it all comes down to it, I agree with you where, they kind of went, who's a known commodity? And I think Brian, this might take us into some of the other things we've said about Olympics. I think they're kind of banking on the fact that he was just in the Olympics too, so people might remember him again.
Well, I mean, he's a big star in China.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm saying. Is
I mean, it's really. I mean, even aside from the Olympics, though, he's already a big star in China. So it's really kind of one of those things where hopefully that gets, the Lakers can sell more merchandise in China, sell more jerseys in China. Maybe, maybe there's television money to be had in China. I don't know. Don't really know how that stuff works with the NBA, but it's clearly a move to stay relevant, even though they know they aren't going to win any games.
Well, I mean, it's a funny thing that also worked to make the Lakers big in China back in the day was to roll out a winning squad.
Yeah,
and it's amazing.
That's too complicated. We don't want to do that.
Yeah, it is. We've bashed them a lot, and I don't think we're done bashing them. I think a prediction that could bite us this season, but I feel fairly confident saying I think neither Philadelphia nor the Lakers are making the playoffs this season.
Well, I think Philadelphia is more likely than LA.
Well, significantly more because
I mean, if you look at the teams where it's likely that some new players are going to surprise us, and then be good and win enough games to make the playoffs, Philadelphia is much more likely, both because the players there are sort of more of an unknown variable, whereas so I think the likelihood that Yi is suddenly an amazing player after being terrible for so long is very low, whereas the likelihood that that Ben Simmons is amazing is kind of like, well, he might be one of those guys who's like a Tim Duncan or a Karl Anthony Towns out of college and is just boom amazing, right? That could totally happen. Whereas I don't think that could ever possibly happen with Yi. I mean, Yi is going to just be the same player he always was. It's terrible.
But guys, let's not forget about the real big Lakers news from the last week or so. They announced that Nick Young is not coming back to the team.
Oh, really? I thought that was still speculation. Is that
maybe
official?
It is still speculation, but it was reported as if it's true. Swaggy's Laker days are over.
Swaggy's days are over.
Oh, well.
It kind of makes sense. I mean, it's clear for this team that giving minutes to younger players, and there are a lot at his position, is more important than
I was mostly joking, but go ahead, Dre.
I was going to say I feel horrible, and I think you might have been going on the same line, Brian. Who was the rookie he was feuding with last season? Because
D'Angelo
of the
Russell.
Yeah, that's
D'Angelo Russell, because the Iggy Azalea, Iggy Azalea recorded conversation about Nick Young cheating.
Yeah.
I think we talked a little bit about that. I'm probably not even going to go through the effort of looking it up for the show notes, but we had a podcast where we discussed that briefly, and it is one of those cases where it's not really shocking to side with the young rookie over the veteran in internal disputes, as well as, he's just not good. He's not a good player. It's shocking how many contracts he gets, and he's probably going to be on another contract. Some team's going to,
he'll get a contract.
You want to hear my guess based on how freaking stupid they've been this offseason anyway? I think he ends up on the Rockets. I think the Rockets are going to sign him for a 2-year, $3 million deal a year.
I don't think so.
All right.
No. He doesn't seem like the type of player that. Maybe I'm wrong, but he doesn't seem like the type of player that.
Well, they signed.
Irrespective of quality.
Yeah.
I don't. He doesn't seem like the type of player they go after.
Fair enough.
But, so I'm actually kind of excited about Philadelphia. I think regardless of whether or not they make the playoffs, they'll be a really fun team to watch. Just because if you look at the style of play of Ben Simmons, the way he played in college, and then the style of play of Juan Carlos Navarro, who's really kind of a creative passer. It should be fun to watch them play.
All right. Well, I've got no...
I don't know much about Saric, but what I've seen of video, mostly from Coach Nick, by the way, he also seems like a big man who really likes to pass the ball. So they could be a really cool team to watch.
Okay. As long as I really, I sound mean, I really hope they don't make the playoffs. And a large part is I'm just, process or not, the fact they got the number 1 pick It's very reminiscent to me of the Washington Wizards. We talked them a little with, winning, getting off the treadmill of mediocrity with John Wall and still arguing that they're terrible. I just, I don't think they're a well-run team, and I want to see them keep failing so I can keep laughing at them, even if, it's worth noting Karl Anthony Towns was amazing, and the Timberwolves still didn't make the playoffs.
Well, there were other reasons, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, one amazing player is not enough, especially not in the West. But, I mean, so the interesting thing about Philly is you can say that, quote, the process, unquote, was a terrible way to run a team, but there's almost no question in my mind that whatever thing Brian Colangelo will do will be worse than the process. So I think you're fine. I mean, the process might be terrible, but there's no questioning that for whatever reasons, whether it was terrible or not, for whatever reasons, the team was in a fantastic space right now, or this coming into this year in terms of draft picks and money situation, right? And there's lots of ways that you can abandon the process and use that money and those draft picks wisely. And I don't think Colangelo will do any of the things that would be wise.
Yeah, it was odd to give that amount of leash. I would agree to get. Clearly it's the off season because we're talking 76%.
I mean, it's the equivalent of just being like you've hired somebody who came in who had this grand master plan, and then you decided to abandon the plan, but instead of bringing in a proven master to take over, you just kind of give the reins to your brother-in-law, because what the fuck? Yeah. It doesn't make any sense.
All right, let's discuss the actual contract that matters that happened in the last 2 weeks, which is LeBron James signed I believe it's $100 million 3-year deal. I saw a fun joke post that was saying LeBron James gave a press conference and said, "Yeah, I don't know how they're going to split that extra penny. Maybe they give it to last year." But anyway, that is good. And we were actually discussing kind of why he did this, because it is interesting, and I hadn't realized the CBA rule. Patrick, why don't you talk a little bit about why Bron signed this deal and the implications in the over 36 rule?
So apparently there is a rule that a player that is over 36 cannot be in a multi-year maximum contract. And I guess the reason, so that means you can't, like, if you're older than 36, you can't sign one. And if you're younger than 36, but will be older than 36 before it expires, you also can't sign one. So that's why he didn't sign like a 5 or 6 year deal or whatever. I think 5 is the maximum, right? Because he would have been over 36 when it ended, and then that would have been illegal according to the CBA. And I guess there's this rule, and I'm by no means not a salary cap expert, but from what I read on Twitter, this rule came up because teams used to abuse this, and I guess one of you, I think it was Brian, brought up Keith Van Horn as the example. They used to sign old players to huge contracts just for the purpose of using them in trades to get around the salary cap. So I guess the last CBA put an end to that by making this illegal. And the speculation is that after 2 years, the NBA, I guess, is it this year or the next year? It's almost a surety that the CBA will be null and voided either through a player strike or a owner's lockout. And I think Trey and I are both in agreement that it seems more likely that the owners will lock out than the players will strike. And in that lockout / strike, whatever, in those negotiations, LeBron James will fight hard to get that rule removed so that he can come back and sign like a 5-year contract for the max. But anyway, that's my understanding of why he did it this way, as opposed to going for maximum years.
And it's also worth noting your prediction about how all of that ends up is, regardless, even if he doesn't get the max, LeBron James at age 36 is going to be on a horrible contract because
no, I didn't say that. I said
really?
He'd retire on a horrible contract.
Okay.
Because at 36, he's probably, even at, for him, 36 is a diminished performance, but he's probably still easily going to be a top 20 player, if not a top 10 player at 36.
The one question I have for you on that, by the way, is just mileage, because
Sure.
We've discussed this before. There has never been a player in the history of the NBA that has put as much wear and tear on their body as quickly as LeBron James. Even Kobe Bryant, who was a high schooler, was ramped up slowly, and even with the playoff success, had some off years in the playoffs. It's worth noting that LeBron James, I think, since 2007, has gone deep in the playoffs every year. He's made the most consecutive finals in modern NBA history, and has been playing international ball as well. Nobody has put this many minutes of basketball on their body at the same age as LeBron James.
And Kobe did battle injuries throughout his 30s, even though he played through it.
Well, and let's remember, Kobe spent his first 2 to 3 years, like most rookies, on the bench getting minutes piecemeal handed out to him, whereas LeBron James played like 2,500 minutes as a rookie or something like that, and was an all-star in his second year. It took Kobe like to year 3 or 4 to become that kind of 2,500 to 3,000 minute player. And plus LeBron has also notoriously throughout his career, well, A, he's been an Iron Man who doesn't get injured very often, and B, he's notoriously been like one to totally accept heavy minutes, or even basically wave off coaches and play for 40 minutes or close to it in games. So he's got a lot of mileage, but I still believe, because so much of what makes him great is his floor vision, his passing, and his rebounding. And those are the types of things that, even as his athleticism diminishes, probably won't diminish. He'll still make really smart decisions. So I still think, definitely at 35, I think he will still be a top 10 player, right? And the thing is, the price of signing him is going to be, but you got to pay me the max years, right? I'm not going to sign a 2-year deal. I'm going to sign a 4-year deal, or a 5-year deal, right? So if you want me, that's what you have to do. You have to basically know going in, okay, I'm paying for the first 2 years of this contract because I'm definitely going to have to pay through the teeth in the last 2 to 3 years of the contract when you're not
essentially the contract that Dwayne Wade was just on. And I would argue this last year was kind of that, where they kind of capitulated and said, as thanks for you attempting to get us LeBron James back, which is what happened when Dwayne Wade opted out of his last year, we will give you one more year for that. But then as soon as that, they cut the cord. I think you're saying the same with LeBron James. So they'll get...
Yeah, there are other great examples. Like Amari Stoudemire's Knicks contract was the same. He was 29 when he signed it. And people thinking, wow, he's going to be 34 when it ends, and his knees, who knows? And boom, that's exactly what happened. It's kind of the same with Chris Bosh. Like, he was pretty old. Even if you disagree with us about our evaluation of how valuable Chris Bosh is, and you can disagree with us, that's fine. You have to agree that a 5-year contract is kind of scary when a guy's around that age. And let's try to think of some other examples. But there's been a lot of, throughout the history of the NBA, this kind of always comes up when you get a player who's at the end of their prime, not at the middle, not at the beginning, but the end of their prime, and you sign him to 5 years. You're probably saying, okay, this is not going to be a great contract when it's all said and done, but whatever. Okay, I'm paying for it now because it's worth it now. And that happens a lot in the NBA, and I think it's especially true with players like LeBron James.
And that, for the record, is why they kind of attempt to do the 36 rule, because what they were saying is they didn't want players that were signing that were worth it at age 36, but they knew weren't going to be worth it at age 39, I guess, and that would retire before then. So I don't know.
There may have been an element of the owners trying to save themselves from themselves, but I think the justification is that there used to be a lot of sham contracts that were only being signed for the purpose of trading players. So you could, if you wanted to trade for LeBron James, you could go give I'm trying to think of who today's equivalent would be, but you could go and you could pick up Juwan Howard and give him a max contract and trade him, right? And even though Juwan Howard isn't going to play, and whoever is acquiring him also knows he isn't going to play, but you're just doing it to make the salary caps match, right?
Juwan Howard might have been 36 in the last millennium.
Yeah. And by the way, we mentioned this pre-show, Patrick, but it is amusing. Just another example of NBA owners, capitalists, so to speak, not really adhering to the same rules in business that they want the NBA to adhere to. There are tons of companies that have essentially golden parachutes for higher-ups. You gave a great example with Ailes at Fox, who's now helping out Donald Trump, because clearly that's good advice. But, these people that, sign big contracts, flub up majorly and leave, and, the company's just on the hook for the money. And for whatever reason, in the NBA, this notion that they might be wasting money on a player past their prime is something that they've got to do away with. So, a little amusing.
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, and let's be fair to the owners. In this sense, they are, of course, acting like capitalists. Bear in mind that, capitalism as a system doesn't necessarily favor maximizing money depending on your situation. So, I mean, clearly owning a monopoly is the best way to make money. So if any given firm should be trying as hard as possible to become a monopoly, if it's legally possible. That's kind of the sort of thing that capitalism encourages, ironically.
Yeah. And then it's, I don't know. Yeah, we could end up down a rabbit hole here. And we already had one economics lecture on the show last week. So let's move along to the Olympics. This is a fun topic. We talked a little last week or 2 weeks ago. Brian passed along a great article by the chief marketing officer of NBC saying some stupid stuff. And needless to say, you were just as infuriated by it as we are, Patrick. This weird get off our lawn millennials, women don't need to watch. Women millennials basically is how NBC is viewing it. Don't need to watch the Olympics live, and you had some great tweets and great thoughts on that.
The best is what a guy I retweeted who basically said, I'm gonna serve food at my restaurant 4 hours after I cook it to like 20% of the people, and then I'm gonna get pissed off at them when they don't eat it. I mean, I find it very ironic that in that article the guy notes that millennials are going to be on Facebook and Snapchat all the time. And yet the conclusion he draws from them is that they're so busy on Snapchat or Facebook doing whatever, playing Bejeweled or whatever, that they're going to skip the Olympics. When the reality is what they're doing on Facebook and Snapchat is seeing the fucking results of the thing that is not on TV and asking themselves, why the hell isn't this live on TV right now? Oh, it's on tonight at 7? Well, fuck that. I've already seen the results. I'm not going to watch it. And that he couldn't draw that conclusion, I think, is kind of amazing. Like, it's a staggering, failure to understand how the world today works. To which I might think maybe what NBC should be doing is putting a millennial in charge of this instead of having an old man yell, "Get off my lawn" to the kids.
And I had two responses to that. First, I cannot remember who this was. It was someone on Twitter, so these aren't my thoughts, but it was brilliant. They pointed out how much they love the term millennial because it applies to people kind of like us. Am I the only millennial in this group? That's really weird.
Depends on how you define millennial.
Because
clearly it doesn't mean people born on the millennial, because those people are fucking 16. So it's not talking about them. It's talking about adults. So how far back do you go?
I don't even know if I count. I was born the year of the computer, which is 80s. So anyway, what I was going to say there is there are millennials that remember dial-up internet and remember call waiting. I'm looking forward to explaining this stuff to my kid. Like there was a time where you had to pay extra on a phone to know someone else was calling you. And anyway, all that stuff, it applies to that. And people who have grown up entirely with high-speed internet. And then to your point, if it's like most recent millennium, these are people that have grown up with supercomputers in their pockets. So it's a really weird range to kind of say the problem is millennials, where you go, that doesn't even apply to one kind of set of people. But the second one, I compared this to the music industry. I've compared a lot of stuff to the music industry. I remember I was in high school, actually, when Napster came along. And I remember the big difference of Napster. I mean, of course, it's free music. Of course, let's not lie, we were stealing. But the bigger thing to me was if you liked the song on the radio, the old method was you went to Target, you went to Tower Records. I was trying to talk to my wife about Tower Records. She never even really went to them, so that made me feel old. But you went to Target, you went to Tower Records. There was a CD in a weird security device that someone had to ring up and open, and then it had this really hard to open plastic, that you had to unwrap, and then it had weird tape over everything that you had to undo, and you spent $10 for a CD that only had one song you wanted on it. That was the old school method. And the new method was I clicked a button on my computer, and 5 to 10 minutes later I was actually one of the first people in my neighborhood to have high-speed internet, which was DSL, so it wasn't even cable, and 5-10 minutes later you got your song. And I argued, the major change from Napster for me was this is so much more convenient, especially I didn't have a car until I was, I think, a junior in high school. So, it's like I don't have to get on the bus or ask for a ride to get the song I want. I just click a button. So that was the amazing part to me, is that the music industry didn't get, until Steve Jobs explained it. Even then, it took forever for them to get there. Didn't get how much better it was in the Olympics. Same boat. It's like, yeah, there are all these people. You said it yourself, Patrick. They identified the demographic. They identified where the demographic was going to be, and then they didn't use that. They used the old method and got mad that no one used the old method.
Yeah, there's that, and there's also, like you said, misidentifying that. Like they say millenniums, and they're thinking it's like 24-year-olds, when that's ridiculous. The people that use Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, or whatever, that age bracket goes up to like 50, which, by the way, hello, is your prime demographic. You talk the people you want to watching your shows, it's that like 35 to 50-year-old age group. Those are the money makers. Those are the people who spend money. Those are the people the advertisers want. Those are the people on Snapchat and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Those are the people who are not watching. It's not. For some reason, they seem to think that people who get how the internet works are in that demographic, but they're not. People who don't get out of the internet how the internet works, and people who don't use the internet and who watch TV as their primary source of information, those people are retired or over 70. Most people that are like normal everyday working people until the age of about 50, 55, all of those people are internet first people, not just people born in 1992. All of those people are. So it's just kind of really, really weird for NBC to take this approach, especially given that it's a big, giant freaking media company. And you're absolutely right. Like, they identify their demographic, and then instead of building the product that their demographic wants, they bitch that their demographic isn't some other demographic, right? They're literally just saying, they're like, I think the analogy I made in email was, they're like the car companies, the American car companies in the 80s, when consumers wanted smaller economic vehicles like the ones that Toyota and Mazda and Honda were buying, and consumers were buying them in droves. And so the American car companies took forever to start building small economical cars, and instead they bitched. They were like, why don't all these young fuckers want Cadillacs? Why don't all these young fuckers want to drive Buick Skylarks? And it's like, who cares why? Build the car that people want to buy. Don't bitch at people for their preferences. And it's kind of the same thing being repeated over and over again. Like, very good companies don't bitch about what their consumers want. They build and sell what their consumers want.
It is getting amusing just to watch too, because I think something else we brought up that Brian and I talked 2 weeks ago and talked the Olympics was kind of the weird sexism. And I don't weird is a weird phrase, because it's not anything abnormal, but it is very old white guyish sexism is the way I should phrase it.
Yeah,
so that's the funny
exposed
thing. But that was what made the NBC even funnier, is that you essentially have like a 60-year-old white guy going like, why don't these broads, and I'm making fun of him, I'm not saying it myself, like, why don't these broads want the same things they did in the 50s? And you look at them and you go, really? Like, haven't you been updated since then? Like, yeah. take a small step forward.
Yeah, this is another awesome lesson about diversity, is that, like, diversity costs you money. Like, let's forget about the moral arguments for diversity, but maybe if half of your producers were women, and maybe if a good mixture of your producers were African American or Asian or whatever, you wouldn't be standing around asking yourself, well, why don't women like my broadcast? Why don't African Americans listen to my broadcast? Maybe if you had actual people that represent those demographics actually working for you in positions of power and making decisions, you'd make a better product that those people want to buy. I don't think that the Olympics would have been such a disastrous product in terms of catering to women if they'd simply had enough women in positions of power who could raise their hand and say, hello, this is stupid, let's not do this.
Right, and that's the irony
because
of it.
It's a room full of white old men making these decisions about what women want, and it's crazy.
That was the excuse they gave, right? Is the reason everything's tape delayed is because of women, because we have to pack shit in a way women want.
Yeah, there was a guy who said women don't watch sports, they care about the journey. Which
and we have
like
to spend
the
this extra
stupidest
time.
Thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so here's all I want to say about this is the ratings tell the story, right? Like, regardless of you think is going to be good or not, the ratings said it's not working anymore, NBC.
Well, and not only that, but what story do they tell? Because, I mean, it's clear that the Olympics had good ratings, but there's a when you look at the Olympics ratings, like your measurement stick isn't, who's watching, an episode of NCIS.
Well, it's your Batman versus Superman point, right, Patrick?
Exactly. If you could make $2 billion, why are you happy that you just made $1 billion?
Right.
That's stupid, right? You literally just lost $1 billion if that's the case.
And they pay a lot for it.
Yeah, they pay a huge sum of money, and through 2032, which is like depressing, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, by the time their contract's up, they might finally get on the internet just in time for us to use holo projectors or something else.
Well, what's worse is just in time for some other company to outbid them and start doing it all wrong again.
Oh,
because I mean, there's a pretty good argument to make that ABC back in the day, had figured out the Olympics because they'd had the Olympics for so long that by the time the NBC took over, NBC had really figured out how to cover the Olympics, and NBC said, well, no, we'll just shovel a bunch of money out here, but we don't really know how to do any of this stuff. And we're also not going to hire all of you away from ABC who have that expertise. We're just going to try and figure it out on our own. And so we'll end up with fucking Matt Lauer on here instead of an actual guy who knows sports. And it's just, it's weird. The whole thing just kind of baffles me. What I don't understand is why, from a corporate perspective, why people aren't getting fired over this. Like from an ownership perspective, I should be looking at my team that just produced the Olympics and saying, you guys are all failures. And since this isn't one of those things where you produce a weekly show and you get to fix your fuck ups next week, we have to wait 4 years to do this again. I'm afraid I'm gonna have to fire y'all because I got to get a better team in here for the next time.
Well, I would assume I would agree with you, Patrick, but we're always kind of shocked by media and sports, etc. And actually, Brian, on the script, because I explained I was going to Ron Burgundy the script today, so I'm just going bullet point by bullet point.
You want some Olympics basketball?
Let's actually talk some Olympics basketball. So you had a couple. Unfortunately, we kind of hit this a little late because, of course, the U.S. men's team took the gold in the midst of a bunch of, I guess turmoil. It's worth noting, like, if you bet against the Olympic team, the U.S. Olympic team, if you were betting the money line or the over-under, not the over-under, I'm missing every term. If you were betting the spread, you made money because they vastly underperformed. Brian, you actually had a really good explanation for this.
Yeah, so a popular thing to say, which is true, by the way, and Charles Barkley kind of went hard on this and got a lot of media credit for it as well. They didn't have the best team, right? Their players just weren't as good as other years. Wasn't as bad as like 2004 Stephon Marbury teams where they didn't win the gold. But they still weren't as good players. But I went even farther than that. And so you can't blame Coach K and company for the players that didn't choose to play. But they played the wrong players, even out of the players that they had. So Kevin Durant is clearly their best player, right? There's no Steph Curry. There's no LeBron James. He was their best player. So they did that right. They gave him a lot of minutes. But aside from that, they did not do a very good job. So I've got this SB Nation article up here right now talking about how they eventually benched DeMarcus Cousins and put DeAndre Jordan into the starting lineup. And that helped turn things around. Well, that was good. Obviously Jordan, we think.
Although it's worth noting, DeMarcus Cousins came back in the final game and was an absolute beast. So
he was great at times. He was great in the warm-ups too. But he's still just not DeAndre Jordan, right? They're just a different class of player. And then
and Jordan fits much better given the other players because
that's right.
I mean, the other players are clearly not like low usage players, right?
That
Almost all of the other
Barkley's
players are high usage players, right?
That Kyle Lowry and the Cavs point guard that destroyed the Warriors in the finals, whose name I'm
Kyrie
Irving. Those guys are not pass first point guards, right? That was part of Barkley's criticism.
But even if they were, they still need the ball in their hands a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so a guy like Jordan is great because he doesn't really need the ball in his hands ever unless it's to catch it and dunk it, or when he's grabbing an offensive rebound or a defensive rebound. So he's great in Team USA. He's arguably better in Team USA than he is even on the Clippers because again, you got 2, 3, 4 guys that want or need the ball to be effective, and he doesn't. So adding a guy like Cousins who's going to take the ball away from those other players who need the ball to be effective is just not a good plan. Even if you disagreed with us about how good Cousins is, and by the way, I think that whole fact that he's constantly getting into foul trouble. We talk about this all the time, that he commits a lot of fouls in the NBA. He doesn't foul out in the NBA very often, but he clearly had lots of trouble with it in international play.
Yeah, I actually got myself into trouble, Patrick, because his rebounding and scoring were actually quite good. And his scoring's not surprising because if he's playing worse defenders in international play than NBA play, not shocking he'd be better close to the hoop. And I was looking at his per minute numbers and I said, why on earth is he was getting, I think, 15 minutes a game when I came in. And I said, why isn't he getting more minutes? Because I didn't go game by game because, dear God, FIBA, your site for stats is so horrible.
Yeah.
It's the worst ever. We didn't do a fuck that guy segment, but fuck that guy to the FIBA stats site.
So hard to find.
Let's do a fuck that guy segment today. We haven't.
All right, let's do it.
I know it's not on the script, Mr. Burgundy, but can we do it?
All right. Well, I stole the first one, and I'll finish it up, and then if you want to go in, or we can finish and go next. But yeah, so what somebody pointed out to me is I said, in international play, it's not 6 fouls to foul it, it's 5, and he's averaging the same number of fouls he does in the NBA, so he can't stay in the game because he's actually fouled out or gotten into foul trouble every game. So, yeah, exact point on fouls mattering a great deal in international play.
And just
and not only that, he's not going to get the benefit of doubt like he would in the NBA, right? He's not going to get any superstar bonuses.
So we're talking a lot about style right now, right? Like which type of player do you want to put out there? But I'll make Dre's argument that you really just want to get your best players on the court the most. And I think that's Coach K's biggest problem.
So I agree with that, but I also agree that, best players can have a lot of meanings, right? I still think, I think we can say with authority that DeAndre Jordan is one of their best players. But the bonus here is that one of the reasons he's such a great player is because he doesn't take bad shots. He only takes shots that are very good shots. That he's extremely efficient scorer because he's only really shooting when he's dunking or close to the hoop or things like that, right? And so the reason that he's good matters. I think a team that was full of point guards who need the ball in their hands would also be really bad because then it's kind of like Kevin Love in Cleveland, right? He's a great player, but he's not as great playing for Cleveland because they don't maximize the things that make him great by giving him the ball all the time. And I'm not even saying that they should, because clearly one of the only reasons Kyrie Irving is great is because of his shot making. He's not great because of his defense or other abilities. So I think Cleveland will, throughout the next couple of years, always have this problem of we have 3 great players, but there's only one ball, so we can't really maximize our team's greatness because of the players and how they work well together. I mean, to me, the only solutions are to trade Irving or to trade Love for players that are great for other reasons.
Well, so just to finish up on this Coach K point, though, of course he's going to play Durant a lot of minutes. He's a great player. He actually fixed his Jordan problem. He got his second best player in there a lot more minutes. But I think Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green were probably the 3rd and 4th best player on the team, and they just didn't get any minutes for some reason. And on top of that, they're known as being defensive specialists, and the team had problems with defense. So I don't know. Getting Carmelo Anthony out there at 86 minutes, Klay Thompson got a lot more minutes than Jimmy Butler. I just don't think he put his best players out there.
I pretty much agree.
One good thing, though, is Harrison Barnes didn't get in there at all. So, being called the worst.
Did he not even get in the medal game, just to be in there?
He had 0 minutes in their last 3 games.
Oh, wow.
They won by 40, and he didn't get off the bench. He must have pissed somebody off. Yeah. He must have done something to piss somebody off.
Oh, so this is versus Australia, Serbia, and France. So maybe this didn't include the gold medal game.
Oh, doesn't it? Oh, yeah, because they won the gold medal game by nearly 40, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if he didn't play any minutes at a 40-point, he must have really gotten under somebody's skin.
And that Serbia game is the first Serbia game where Jokic went off. They're talking about. So these aren't the total numbers I'm showing up right here in this SB Nation article, but the point stands. They didn't change the distribution too much. I was disappointed with Coach K for this. And just to finish off this point, there was a Jerry Colangelo.
No. We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
What do we got?
What is your intermission before that?
I don't have an intermission before that. I just want to talk about that later.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So what are we talking now? Or do you want to?
What's on the script? What's next on the script?
Because that's Jerry Colangelo is next.
I know, but what's after that?
All right, fine. After that, let's talk. Okay, so by the way,
a positive
a major point that's come up and is huge is in this Olympics, the United States is obviously taking a lot of credit for all their golds, all of their medals, and it's really worth noting that so much of this Olympics was the women pulling their weight, the women getting most of the medals, and
arguably they would have gotten more medals if they just had parity between of events offered, right? I mean, like there are fewer, like the swimmers have fewer events than the men. I think the track and field has slightly fewer events than the men. It's like, what's that about?
I love watching women's wrestling and weightlifting, by the way. I know that's not brand new, but it's somewhat new. Those are awesome to watch.
But what I'll say is, at the very start of these Olympics, actually, Dave Barry released a post that said, I forget who, but some of the better, a few players sat out for Team USA, the women's basketball, and he said they're going to be fine, and it turns out they were fine. They did exactly what was expected. They crushed it. And so that's what Brian has next on the script is Diana Taurasi, Sue Bird, and Tamika Catching savor 4 Olympic gold medals.
And I bet you that one of them is going to get 5.
Oh, that's amazing. Sue Bird is young enough.
Sue Bird's pretty old, isn't she? 35, 36?
Yeah,
but
I was going to say, what are you talking about, Brian?
I think Taurasi is the one that's going to get a 5.
Catchings is 37, so she's not...
She's actually retiring after this year from the
Okay, here we go. Bird is 34 and Bird is 35 and Taurasi is 34. So they could do it.
And Taurasi's 34?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought she was 33.
Wow.
Well, maybe not. I don't know. Bird is like one of those players where I just, every time I watch her, I feel like she could play until she's 50. The way she moves, like she's so economical, right? And she's so much of her game is just that like ability to just kind of shoot from anywhere. So, she's that one in the gym who just like doesn't need very much space to shoot and crafty as hell. I just feel like she could play forever, but I've been wrong about these things before. and from my seat, like relatively close to I actually sit behind the visitors bench at Storm games, but I'm close enough to see things going on at the Storm bench, and I see plenty of times where she's in the game and she wants out because she's like needs to rest or whatever. And sometimes I've seen her even get mad at the coach, just be like, "Why the hell did you leave me in there so long?" Like coming off the floor, clearly upset that she felt like she needed a rest earlier than that. I mean, obviously this. Not only are the U.S. women dominant, they are set to be dominant for the future. I think because if you look at players like Greiner and Stewie,
Della Don.
And Della Don, yeah, of course. They're, especially because the way they play works really well in the international game. So,
all right.
Yeah.
So do you okay, so question, this still falls under Olympics. You want to save Jerry Colangelo till later, or do you want to go on to the next subject?
He's my fuck that guy.
Let's do fuck that guy right now, because I already gave mine. Patrick, okay, I think we've kind of spoiled the lead, but go for it.
My fuck that guy is Jerry Colangelo for his shit talking in his interview. I think if you compare Carmelo Anthony's interview, where he was just incredibly gracious, he was clearly like emotional. He was so touched to have been part of Team USA for 4 Olympics now, and he was pretty much. We shit talk on Carmelo Anthony all the time for basketball reasons, but when it comes to like professionalism, he's one of the best, I think, in the NBA. And you compare that to Colangelo's interview where he just acts like a douchebag, where he.
Do you want me to read what he said, Patrick? He said,
"Yeah, let's read the quote aloud."
We just need these other countries to get their acts together and become more competitive. That's what he said.
So. So it's one thing and I think what he's trying to do, he's trying to channel his inner Gino here, right? And he's trying to be like he was, trying to say that, that Connecticut, UConn is not bad for women's basketball because there's nothing wrong with being a winner and other teams should just try to win. And I'm not going to apologize for being a winner. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm sorry, I'm not going to apologize for being a winner. There's nothing wrong with being a winner. But you don't have to say, okay, everyone else has to get their act together when that's. I mean, the problem isn't other countries getting their act together. The problem is that other countries don't necessarily want to play basketball, right? I mean, my quote on Twitter was, "Yeah, if only those fucking Germans would stop wasting their time winning football World Cups, they could be awesome at basketball." You know, if if only those stupid Chinese would stop, being awesome at swimming and gymnastics and ping pong, then they could also be awesome at basketball, right? And it's just and if only those dumbass Brazilians would stop playing football and volleyball, then they could also be great at basketball. It's this isn't a question of other countries getting their act together. It's a question of other countries have other top priorities, right? I mean, we suck at handball so much we don't even have a fucking Olympic team. It's not about getting their act together. It's about where the priorities are. And basketball just isn't as popular in many countries as it is in the U.S. And by the way, the implication that somehow the U.S. would be fucking amazing if the NBA didn't exist and this was a country where we only played American football is also crazy. Clearly the reason we are so good at basketball is because we have 100 million people playing basketball all the time. So you get 100 million people together, then probably the best 10 of those people are really fucking good at the sport. Whereas,
by the way,
if you have 10 million people playing, then your best 10 probably aren't as good. So
there's a fantastic the book Soccernomics by Szymanski, who brought up some of the soccer, because that's what you kept comparing it to, brought up some key points to a team being good at soccer, to get an internationally competitive team. And two of the major points he said were, one, money, because in the United States and Britain, we hear these amazing stories about against all odds adversity people coming against everything and turning into a superstar, right? And I'm not going to denigrate that and say that they didn't have hardships, but it's just worth noting in Great Britain, if you say, yeah, I was really poor, I was so poor, my family's washing machine was on the roof. That was one of the examples Szymanski gave. I forget the soccer player that he was talking about. I guess footballer, if we're saying Britain. He's like, you're rich in another country. If you've got a washing machine, who cares that you have to go up to the roof? You're freaking rich. And the United States is the same way in many regards, right? The fact that, we actually have basketball courts that everybody can play in is huge. And the other thing he brought up was, having a network of competitive teams you could play against. So in soccer, that's one reason actually why Britain is at a disadvantage compared to some other places in Europe, because those other places are very close to other good competitive squads. And so when it all comes down to that, with basketball, I mean, that's a huge point, which is to say, not only does everybody play basketball here, or a lot of people play basketball here, this is where all the good basketball programs are, right? If you want to play, the best squads, it's worth noting a fun thing is that LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony both played each other in high school. So, the good high school squads play each other here. The good colleges are all here. The network for training in basketball is all in the United States. So, his point is falls very flat, because what he's basically saying is, we have the biggest edge in basketball. Why isn't anybody better? And then to your point about making this a very appropriate fuck that guy is, the games were a lot closer than they were supposed to be. Vegas was United States should win this game by 50, and they were tied at the half.
Yeah.
Dre, I have a different complaint about Colangelo than even you guys have brought up so far. Mine is that he is the guy saying this. His credibility is running the U.S.A program. And, basically, Carmelo Anthony, again, and Coach K, who I've been complaining about, has been the cornerstones of the program. Like you said, they're not covering the spread. He's not... you could say maybe it's his responsibility to recruit the best players to be on the team. As much as, we give credit for those players who are there, he's not able to convince these other guys to get on it. And he's been a failed executive in the NBA, too. So he's I don't know, do you remember that Warner Brothers cartoon where there's, the little tiny yippy dog following the big buff dog around? He's like that. Let's say it for what it is. The players deserve... Oh, speaking of dogs... They know what's up.
Sorry. My wife got home and the dog's really excited.
He's going to take this arrogant stance when he has so little responsibility for how good the team is. That's my problem
I agree completely with that point, too. And that's just yet another way in which he was just the opposite of a gracious winner. It's just...
He should feel lucky that those guys let him hang around,
Yeah, seriously. This is a guy who's the executive, so it's your job to get, Kevin Love and Chris Paul and Steph Curry and on and on and on to play in the USA team, and you didn't get it. You didn't make it happen, right? Which is how you end up with Harrison Barnes on the team, and and yet you're somehow taking credit for orchestrating some gigantic success, and it's just, ugh. And the whole other country should get their act together bullshit is, again, I mean, the Olympics is a national sport. It's not like Germany can just go out and recruit LeBron James to play for them in the Olympics. There's no act for them to get together there, right? I mean, this isn't like it's a free market situation. So countries have different priorities and different talents and different
cultures,
player bases, right? So, I mean, all I could say to that, Colangelo, is like, try to field a team that can beat Germany in football, or that can beat Australia in Australian rules football,
Kenyans and Ethiopians at long distance
or they can play cricket against India. And until you can do any of those things, just shut the fuck up and get your own act together.
I guess the final exclamation point on that note is that it is very much the definition of being born on third and thinking you've hit a triple. So, and we'll see how the Colangelo clan does with the 76ers going forward. I can't wait. All right, Patrick, I candidly don't care if you read my article or listened to the interview with Dave Barry on descriptive versus predictive stats. It's very Groundhog's Day-ish. About once a year, I kind of get it in me to look.
That's the way I felt about it. Very Groundhog's Day. Not from what you were saying, but from what your responses from the commenters was very like, oh, here we go again.
But yeah, I basically did the once a year, and actually I have one more article. The one that I was intending to write first will be the one I write last. Maybe some George Lucas thing going on there. One more article on me on it, but it's the classic kind of look at some of the major advanced stats and point out kind of the general problem with a lot of analysis. And nothing really came from it other than, it got Dave Barry to come give a guest lecture right before school started. I think maybe that was part of it as a tune-up game because he's going back to college to teach, obviously. So I don't know if you have any exclamation points or anything to add to that, but I figured I'd at least throw it out there since, you weren't here to listen to me and Brian and Dave talk about it ad nauseum the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, my only exclamation point is something that you mentioned in the comments where when people say, well, if it's not predictive, why do you guys try to predict every year? My answer to that is A, because it's fun, and B, because we're not trying to predict necessarily just performance, but also things like minutes and coaching and aging and injuries and many things that have nothing to do with the metric itself. You're trying to predict, right?
And by the way, I want to give one last kind of tangential note that'll be hidden in this thing. I'm not even going to put on the show notes. Looking at a lot of these metrics, RAPM, RPM that we bashed in articles, I'll put the one last podcast with Dave on that note as my only show note. And the show notes are going to be very brief this week because I'm going to be traveling. But all I was going to say is I noticed that a lot of these metrics use 15-year RAPM as their metric to regress on. And what makes that fascinating to me, Patrick, is using it as a predictor, is that means all of the data is there. So when they show 1998 to 2001 prediction, I'll put that in quotes, their training set included that, I believe. I'll have to look into it and do some research. But just the general kind of analysis drives you batty. That was probably even too out there because it requires listening to two shows to know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, appreciate that. The basic context, if you didn't listen to the last 2 weeks of shows, is I did some articles and a few podcasts on predictive versus descriptive stats and some of the problems with some other analysis where people always say, if your metric's so good, why don't you use it to predict the next year? We kind of do, but there are other things that are involved. And the only real point I want to make is that's not the purpose of the metric. That's kind of like asking why your measuring cup isn't telling you how hot the oven is. Why are you using a measuring cup to try and determine how hot the oven is? All right. I don't have too much else. I'm going to go through the last couple of links Brian put on the thing. We are halfway through the offseason, according to SoCal Kid on NBA Reddit. So that's good. Hopefully we'll be back to discussing predictions. Actually, one that I do like, Patrick, because I may talk about the Bulls upcoming, because I am fascinated by the Bulls next season because they have so much going on that team with good players, bad players, minute allocation, who's going to get the ball. I honestly can say I have no idea what's going to go on with the Bulls. I could see them being in contention for the top of the East, and I could see them back in the draft lottery next season.
Yep, I can see all of that happening too. I mean, it's really. I think of the same thing about the Knicks, right? Like it's like they look kind of terrible on paper, but then who knows? Derrick Rose all of a sudden, I'm healthy, I'm fine, and you're like, well, okay. Joakim Noah's all of a sudden, oh, I'm healthy, I'm fine, and you throw all your predictions out the window.
I could see Noah coming back, and I mean, I wouldn't discount that because he still played well last year. I mean, I would actually love to see a Derrick Rose resurgence just because I always kind of root for the underdog or the unexpected. As much as we touted the Warriors last season, I loved seeing LeBron James having the biggest upset in NBA Finals history, I believe, just because that's new. Sorry.
No, it's
Brian.
okay. Keep going.
I mean, that's just so much. That's so much more interesting, right? The narrative of best team in the NBA beats much worse team in the finals. I've seen that. I've seen that exact story, even in my lifetime of the NBA finals I have watched over 90% of the time. So seeing the other story, it's new, it's novel, it's fresh. I like it.
No, I love LeBron too, and the Bulls are interesting because a player like Wade and some of their other older players, they're really hard to predict how they're going to do. Is he going to completely fall apart, or will he regain some of the old greatness? That'll be interesting. The only thing I have to say about predictions, though, is that I'm excited to see the new season rosters get put into the engine on the site, and we can look at the WTF engine. I think that'll be kind of the only interesting. And that's not even a prediction. That's just kind of looking at what happened, but that'd be interesting.
All right. See. So Brian is using a very clever management trick that you probably picked up on Silicon Valley. Last year, I built a prototype of something called the WTF engine, which basically just takes last year's performance, this year's performance, and compares the difference. And Brian liked it, and I guess wants it coming out this season. So this season, you'll probably see that at some point. Thank you very much for that, Brian.
It's not just a feature on the site. You're gonna have to redo it. Well, apologies for that.
God. All right. No, I'll have to finish. It's the classic. You've finished it halfway, and you've got to finish it out before it goes out the door. Patrick, you and I, as software developers, are very familiar with the get the thing. Whatever. What's the term? I may have been out of industry for too long.
Just change where it's pointing to the database, right? That's all it is. That's what it means to non-developers.
And I think we've got Patrick to check out. He's like, this sounds like work. I'm on a work call. I'll go check Facebook. All right. Very last thing that you brought up is over at Nylon Calculus, who I know is just in love with us lately with how nice we've been to them. Ian Levy, who hasn't talked to me in a while, actually posted.
I love
NBA.
him, though. He's great.
He's a good writer, though. He uses a little too much Dre, a little too much BPM. But anyway, said that the NBA is actually going to have a hackathon where, they give out data and let people come in and try stuff. That's kind of cool, although, we started the show talking about, NBC being curmudgeonly and get off my lawn to youngins. That's just kind of my shtick on the show at this point about the advanced stats movement. I'm just, best case scenario, people that go to this hackathon, some NBA team's going to offer you 1/5 your value to work for them. So good luck.
They're going to reveal a hot topic around the league and have them work on it, but it's not been revealed yet. So we'll have to see what that is. I'm sure it's something you'll like, Dre, like usage or something like that.
I'm just going to roll my eyes. It's whatever. It'll be interesting. I'll read the article and then complain about it. And yeah, that's my shtick. Glad you guys still listen to me do that. All right, Patrick, anything else to add? I know we wound down towards the end there, and we're at about an hour, so obviously I'm good finishing up.
I got nothing else to add.
All right, let's go to shout-outs. You've actually got a couple, Brian, so I'll let you blaze through those. Patrick, if you got any shout-outs, you can go after Brian, then I'll finish them up, and we'll be done.
Oh, I've got my favorite shout-out maybe in a few weeks is to Wilson Chandler of the Denver Nuggets. He caught a 350-pound Goliath grouper. Look at this photo, guys, if you're watching the video show. Good job, Wilson Chandler. I was really happy about that. And we've also got the Orange County Register has an article called Meet the Yoda of the NBA Salary Cap. It tells the story of Larry Kuhn, who is, obviously everyone who watches this show knows who he is and follows him on Twitter, but I enjoyed reading about Larry Kuhn and his life at UC Irvine, so you can check that out too. And that's it for my shout-outs this week.
All right, my shout-out, I hope I get the name right, is to Paul Chelmio. I think I butchered that.
Looks like Shalimo.
Shalimo, thank you. All right, so anyway, the way he worked is he won silver in the 5,000 meter in the Olympics. but he was disqualified, and when he was getting his his interview with the press was when they revealed it to him. So he was sitting there with the American flag, piped about being, I think, the first American to medal in this event in many, many years. And they said, you've been disqualified, and he's just, distraught and whatever. Now, the good news is he actually got his medal back. They said it was fine. We complain about ref calls in the NBA here. I don't even understand ref calls in Olympic racing, but whatever. I guess, they charged him with a technical and then said it wasn't his fault. But the other mean part is I believe it was another American that thought that they won bronze. I think it was Bernard Lagat. I'm not sure if he's American, but he's 41 years old. Thought he had gotten bronze thanks to that DQ. And then, of course, after they reinstate the silver medal to Paul, I'm just going to call him Paul, they had to break it to him. So essentially the Olympic judges, refs, whatever, just trolled a bunch of people, making them think they had medals and then not have medals and then have them again. Gotta love it.
And Lagat is Kenyan, Dre, but he's Kenyan American, actually. So yeah, you're right.
Fair enough. Any shout outs, Patrick?
My shout out is to Patrick Claybon for a wonderful tweet on Twitter. And I think that was probably up during the show, and if not, it's probably in the show notes.
It is.
And his beautiful response to NBC's comment that the millennials are idiots and didn't watch the Olympics, and he basically tweeted and said, "Yeah, I'm going to open a restaurant that serves food 4 hours after cooking to 26% of my customers, and then I'm going to blame them for not eating."
And Patrick,
and that's exactly
the headline that he replied to, we haven't said that yet, is NBC's 12 billion Olympics bet stumbles, thanks to millennials. That's almost like saying thanks Obama.
Yeah, exactly. It really pretty much is. It's like, thanks Obama.
One of my favorite
and then he
articles
had a follow-up tweet that was not as visibly viral, but I thought was still funny, which starts like, serves food in a trash can, and somebody comes by and complains, "Why is this in a trash can?" And the restaurant owner says, "Look, women don't actually like food. They just like stories." Which I think is hilarious, because it makes exactly as much sense as NBC's bullshit about women not liking sports. Look, women don't actually like sports. They just like the story about the sports, which makes no sense.
I think I mentioned this to Brian, Patrick, but one of my other favorite notes is actually professional wrestling saw a dip in ratings, which was expected. But if you look at the demos, Dave Meltzer, who is the godfather of all things, knows all the metrics about stuff. He said that it was basically women leaving to watch the Olympics. So even another sport, it's funny where they're saying women don't watch sports or sports entertainment, but other sports entertainment got hurt because women left it. It's such
it's so stupid. And the funny thing about this too is it's not like all the men. The men have all secretly been fucking sports of rowing for years, and now that the Olympics are on, they're dying to see the rowing. It's like men and women equally are not fans of most of the sports of the Olympics, right? Like, it's not like men or women are big fans of weightlifting or judo or sports or any other things that we all tune in to see every 4 years. It's got nothing to do with being a sports fan in general. It's not like, it makes no sense to draw any kind of gender line on that. It's just ridiculous.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, that's been our show. If you found us not through the site, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. We go live usually every Tuesday or Wednesday, approximately 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Of course, you'll have to follow myself, Nerd Numbers, Patrick Minton, NBA Geek, or Brian Foster. Boxscore Brian on Twitter to know exactly when, because, hey, scheduling is hard. Additionally, I didn't give you the link. That's twitch.tv/Nerd Numbers. And if you missed that, you can catch that on channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. I think I'm forgetting something on this outro, but you know what? You've heard it before. Enjoy your week, and we'll see you next time.